Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Gurudasa Jayadvaita Swami Nitinamine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine. Namaste Saraswate Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nirvirsesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Privrajagacharya Astottara Satashi Shrimad, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Privrajakacharya Astottara Sata Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrindi Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sriva Sadigora Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shyamakund Radhakund, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrind Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Panchatattva Prabhu. And welcome everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. It is Wednesday, December 13th, 2023 in New York. And we're starting tonight with Srimad Bhagavatam's third canto, chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Lord Kapila is speaking to Mother Devahuti, and I believe tonight we're starting with text number 35, and I'm happy to be corrected if that's not right, but I remember 34 was quite chunky and technical, and we didn't get beyond that. Also, if someone this evening would care to monitor the chat window, that would be awesome, helpful, and great. I'll start us off if that's all right for text 35. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nabhasa Shabdatan Matrat Kalagatya Vikurvataha Sparsho Bhavat Tato Vayus Tvaksparshasya Chasangraha. From ethereal existence, which evolves from sound, the next transformation takes place under the impulse of time, and thus the subtle element touch, and thence the air and sense of touch become prominent. Purport. In the course of time, when the subtle forms are transformed into gross forms, they become the objects of touch. The objects of touch and the tactile sense also develop after this evolution in time. Sound is the first sense object to exhibit material existence. And from the perception of sound, touch perception evolves, and from touch perception, the perception of sight. That is the way of the gradual evolution of our perceptive objects. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana Shulakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistang Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Bandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The picture that Kapila Dev gives us in this chapter, it's reasonable. It corresponds to our experience. Things proceed from subtle to gross in the manifestation of everything in the material world. And even in our day-to-day experience, like if you want to build a chair, first there's the idea of a chair, and then you get a picture in your mind of what you want it to look like. And then if you want to actually build the thing or show someone else what you want it to look like, you have to draw a picture or maybe use some computer design modeling software if you want to get really fancy. But things proceed from subtle to gross. And then finally, you get a chair. You know, the ingredients are there. That's how things manifest. So that's what's being described here. The elements, one after another, proceed from more subtle to less subtle. And then finally, you get gross matter and the interactions of gross matter. In our previous class, we were hearing about how the ether, the element of ether works and what that does, the function that it performs in the material world. And I didn't get a chance to read it, but Srila Vishwanath had some very interesting, very short comment to say about the role that ether plays. And if I can just call it up here. Yes, he says that this verse describes the characteristics of ether. It gives space to the living entities, a place for internal and external actions. It gives space to the living entities, a place for internal and external actions, which I found very interesting because if you try to explain the universe minus what Kapila Dev is giving us, minus the benefit of transcendental knowledge, you might have a difficult time explaining where space comes from. You know, I don't know how that's done, and I'd love to speak with Dr. Doug Watson about this at some point. But it seems like you'd have to show a whole lot of mathematical calculations to describe how something starts to exist when there's no space for it to exist in. Anyway, that's not my field of expertise. It's just a personal interest of mine. So when Srila Vishwanath talks about a place for internal and external actions, internal, we'll hear in upcoming verses, there are invisible sense objects. That's what Prabhupada talked about in the last verse. He gave the example of how television transmits three-dimensional things from one place to another. In the intervening space between the TV studio, let's say, and your living room or your mind and your eyes, there's invisible sense objects hurtling through this stuff called ether. So there's internal actions and external actions. External actions exist in three-dimensional space. Internal actions, thinking, feeling, and willing, are included in those. And they have to have some space to go on. You need room. So Krishna kindly provides the real estate, both subtle and gross, for us to do our thing in the material world, for us to have ideas, execute them, have desires, and fulfill them. And so getting back to the verse we started with today, yes, from ethereal existence, which evolves from sound. Now we're taking it one step further towards gross matter. The next transformation takes place under the impulse of time. We've discussed this many times, how time is like the stirring element that keeps all the modes moving, that takes pradhan, which is like the amalgamation of all the modes, and keeps it moving around so that transformations can take place. Because without time, and that would be another very interesting question for Dr. Doug Watson, where does time come from in the materialistic view of the universe? Is there actually a 0 hour? And then the logical question is, what happened before that? Time needs to be there for any phenomena to move, anything to happen. And here we're hearing the subtle element, touch, and thence the air and sense of touch become prominent. All these things are distinct. There's the sense of touch, our experience of what it feels like. Then there's the actual tactile sense, the nerve endings and the gross phenomena that are involved in touching and feeling something. Then there's the object itself that's being touched, and all these things are distinctly taken apart. That's what Sankhya means. We're counting up all the material elements just to make it very clear to us that we are different from these things. I was thinking about this, the whole process of how, if you have a spiritual reality where everything is conscious, everything is existing as it is, and then you have to create some gross or subtle space for living entities that do not want spiritual reality. You have to get very fancy with your technology. And I was thinking about how virtual reality works. You have a goggles and gloves, and that's the you have to show how images come from some computer through some wires or whatever into your mitts or your goggles, and enable you to think that you are in this simulated virtual reality. And that's the favor that Krishna does for us. He provides a very elaborate, practically inescapable, seamlessly constructed virtual reality. And this is how it's made. This is how it's made. Things are made from subtle, most subtle is spiritual, to gross, gross matter, three-dimensional, or, solids, liquids, gases, radiant energy and space. And this is just how it's done. And without this description, we would never know. We could never imagine such a thing. Or if we could, we might imagine something different next week and cast out the previous idea, which is just what happens when you try to do things speculatively. So far, Panchatattva Prabhu says, and none of this subtle and gross evolution of creation happens in the spiritual world. Yes. And then you put suspension of disbelief in quotes. Would you care to expand on that?
That's in reference to that, virtual reality experience. People get so absorbed. It's the phenomenon is called suspension of disbelief. You're enmeshed in some machinery that's causing you to have this experience, and you get to the point where you become unmindful of the fact that this is an artificial arrangement. Now the materialists are working harder and harder to create more and more illusions within illusion to keep people distracted.
Yeah, like we really need that. But I guess we do, or else, it wouldn't be there. Yeah, like a good movie will do that to you too. You forget that there's a script and actors and cameras and makeup and lights and sets and all that stuff. I got a message from Tulsi Priya saying, making sure that I used the proper terminology. When I was talking about television transmitting three-dimensional objects, I meant the images of three-dimensional objects, because something that actually transmits three-dimensional objects would more properly be called a teleporter. Or I don't even know how those 3D copying machines work that people make stuff out of. Someone would have to explain that to me. Other comments or questions? There's a lot going on here. If not, we can move on. Oh, wait, there's more. No one has so far volunteered to to monitor the chat. Is there someone who'd be willing to do?
Gurudas has a comment. He says, suspension of disbelief sounds like an interesting element of faith. When we approach this philosophy, we are trying to suspend our disbelief.
Do you mean when we approach Krishna consciousness, we have to suspend our disbelief? Is that what you mean?
Meaning, Hare Krishna, my obeisances, meaning we're suspending what we don't yet connect to or accept as spiritual reality. If that's not strong yet, then we're by accepting the principles, we're suspending our disbelief that, in other words, we're suspending our doubts that, oh, this can't be true. This is too fantastic. This is too, the description of the universe in the fifth canto, or the hellish worlds, or even the spiritual world with the forms of the Lord. At some point, seems it's actually a nice term. I know that term, as some of you might from doing some acting, that we have to suspend our disbelief when you're watching a drama. But I think it could probably apply to someone coming to spiritual life, and wanting to accept and be faithful.
Sure. I mean, it applies to any process of knowledge, really, because whether you're interested to learn about Krishna consciousness, or whether you're interested to learn about chemistry, you start at some point not knowing. And then let's, just in giving the example of chemistry, you walk into a lecture hall or whatever, a classroom, and then you open your notebook and the teacher starts talking, and he's telling you about stuff that you maybe never heard of before, like electron shields and covalent bonds and, things like that. And you just start writing it down. You believe it because there's some interest there, or, whatever. You've laid your money down, you better learn something. So that's the element of faith. You start with some faith, shraddha. And it's the same thing that happens in spiritual life. There's an unfair dichotomy often made between people that say that on one side, the hard sciences, that's knowledge, that's information, that's technology. And you people who believe things that you hear in scriptures, that's faith. But they're not maybe thinking of this point that faith is required with any kind of knowledge. Saraswati Mata has a comment. I'll read it. She says, Pranams, one may be asked if the spiritual senses are more or less like the material senses, but function in Krishna consciousness at all times. But material senses may malfunction too. I was wondering, Mataji, would you mind maybe unpacking that question a little bit more? I'm not getting the full sense of it, and I think you might be able to give us that vocally better than writing.
For instance, sometimes we are asked, all right, you've explained a little bit about spiritual body as opposed to the material body that we have, and the spiritual world and the material world, which is a perverse reflection. But what about the senses? We know that right now our spiritual senses are covered by the material coverings and the modes of nature, but what really are the spiritual is there any comparison that you can make between those in the spiritual world, their spiritual senses and our material senses in terms of sight and touch and smell and hearing and all of that. We know that, like this sense of sight that can malfunction. We need glasses. I need glasses. I can't see without my glasses. And some people have hearing impairment. They cannot hear. So sometimes they could, I've been asked this. Well, can you give a little bit more detail about the spiritual senses? Are they like how some animals, they have such acute sight, or like the dogs, the smell. So they're wondering that what about the spiritual senses? What are they like? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things come to mind. The first is Rishikena, Sevana, Bhakti, or Uchyate, that there are senses and they're covered by matter to a greater or lesser degree. And when they're uncovered to the greatest degree, that's when a person is liberated, able to actually live in spiritual reality. Because, like you say, there's dogs, their sense of smell seems to be way beyond, most human beings. There's vultures that can see, a vole from so many hundreds of feet. I can't do that. So we're granted various levels of access to reality. And then people who have, like you say, visual impairments, auditory impairments, it's just various coverings that are put on us by the material nature. But and then the virtual reality example applies in this case too, because if you're in a virtual reality, all you can experience is what the sensors, what the software allows you to experience. But you take those things off, and then you can experience much more. Like there are people, there's evidence of telekinesis. There's evidence of all kind of what we call paranormal facts. People able to do things like remote sensing and all of those. That's like a further ability of the senses to interact just with matter that most people don't have. So once we come to the point of talking about spiritual senses, then we have to understand that then all the coverings are off. All the coverings are off. We're able to, great sages are able to see past, present, and future. Most people can't do that. They're just stuck in a very tightly focused, passionate present. I don't know if that starts to answer your question, but those are some thoughts that come to mind.
Like, how superheroes, they have superpowers. They can transfer themselves, teleportation, and just these superpowers that movies, they profit from them. So sometimes they wonder, do like the spiritual senses, are they like superpowers?
You could think of them like that. Tulsi Priya mentions suspension of disbelief comes from theater. You know that what you are watching is not real, but you suspend disbelief. Like you're sitting in, an auditorium and you're in Venice. If I recall, she says, the original term is willing suspension of disbelief, as Gurudas Prabhu says, yes. And Panchatattva Prabhu says, see Srimad Bhagavatam 8:19-24 purport. Do you have that purport at hand, Prabhu? You could share that with us?
Yes, I do. There's the applicable portion is, real happiness is described in Bhagavad Gita 6:21. Sukham atyantikam yattad buddhi graham atindriyam veti yatra nachaivayam stitas chalati tattvataha. In the spiritually joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness and enjoys himself through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, unquote. One has to perceive happiness by the super senses. The super senses are not the senses of the material elements. Every one of us is a spiritual being, Ham Brahmasmi, and every one of us is an individual person Our senses are now covered by material elements, and because of ignorance, we consider the material senses that cover us to be our real senses. The real senses, however, are within the material covering. And then goes on. And Prabhupada also quotes the same verse. You quoted, Rishikeni Rishikesha Seven Bhaktir Uchate.
Jai, thank you so much. That's very cool. Mother Saraswati says thank you. Can we move on, or is there more discussion on this verse? I was wondering, Madhupati Prabhu is on our call tonight, if he'd be willing to read and offer some comments. We haven't heard from him in a while. It'd be very nice if he's willing and able to do so. Otherwise, Panchatattva Prabhu, I'll rely on you to nominate or read as you see fit.
We're going to get Madhupati Prabhu?
Maybe not fast enough for our broadcast purposes. So.
Okay, well, I'll just go. Well, how about Guru Das? We haven't heard from him in a long time. Of course, I wasn't in Monday's class, so I don't know. But Guru Das Prabhu, would you like to read?
Well, I think the devotees have heard from me recently.
Okay. Well, they've heard from me fairly recently, too. Text 36, right? Midudvam katinatvam cha saityam usnatvam evacha etat sparshasya sparsatvam tanmatratvam nabasvataha. Softness and hardness and cold and heat are the distinguishing attributes of touch, which is characterized as the subtle form of air. Purport. Tangibility is the proof of form. In actuality, objects are perceived in two different ways. They are either soft or hard, cold or hot, etc. This tangible action of the tactile sense is the result of the evolution of air, which is produced from the sky. Wow.
Would you like to read the next one? They kind of go together.
Okay. Text 37. Chalanam vyuhanam praptir netritvam dravya sabdayoho savendriyanam atmatvam vayo karma bilakshanam. Translation: the action of the air is exhibited in movements, mixing, allowing approach to the objects of sound and other sense perceptions, and providing for the proper functioning of all other senses. Purport. We can perceive the action of the air when the branches of a tree move, or when dry leaves on the ground collect together. Similarly, it is only by the action of the air that a body moves, and when the air circulation is impeded, many diseases result. Paralysis, nervous breakdowns, madness, and many other diseases are actually due to an insufficient circulation of air. In the Ayurvedic system, these diseases are treated on the basis of air circulation. If from the beginning one takes care of the process of air circulation, such diseases cannot take place. From the Ayurveda as well as from the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is clear that so many activities are going on internally and externally because of air alone. And as soon as there is some deficiency in the air circulation, these activities cannot take place. Here it is clearly stated, netritvam dravya shabdayoho. Our sense of proprietorship over action is also due to the activity of air. If the air circulation is stifled, we cannot approach a place after hearing. If someone calls us, we can hear the sound because of the air circulation, and we approach that sound or the place from which the sound comes. It is clearly said in this verse that these are all movements of the air. The ability to detect odors is also due to the action of the air. Om Jnanatamranda Shakaranjana Salakaya Chakshumanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Oh, our scientist isn't on yet. Oh, well. Even from the material science.
Prabhu, I think you muted yourself somehow. You might want to just go back a couple sentences.
Oh, sorry. Om Jnanatamranda Shakaranjana Salakaya Chakshumanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Even from the point of view of material science, sound cannot carry in a vacuum. There has to be the medium of air for sound to move. And when astronauts go into outer space, there's no transmission of sound in space because of the paucity of the air element. So those things are known to modern science. And of course, but that's just an aside. What we're understanding or studying here is how gross things appear from subtler things, subtle, less subtle, gross elements, grosser. So that's what's happening here. And we're hearing about the distinguishing attributes of touch, softness, hardness, cold and heat, which is a subtle form of air. And then how to detect air. The action of air is exhibited in movements, mixing, allowing approach to the objects of sound and other sense perceptions, and providing for the proper functioning of all other senses. This is an interesting field that Ayurveda delves into quite deeply, but isn't as well understood in Western medicine. How disturbances to what is regarded as vata, the three doshas, there's vata, pitta, and vata, pitta, and
Kapha.
what is it?
Kapha.
Kapha, mucus, bile, and air. Kapha, mucus, pitta, bile, air, vata. So when vata gets disturbed, as commonly happens especially when one approaches old age, these debilitating conditions can develop. Arthritis, Parkinson's disease, all of these different things are manifestations of various disturbances of the bodily air. And also mentioned here are other diseases like paralysis, nervous breakdown, madness, and so forth. So Prabhupada says here that if one from the beginning takes care of the process of air circulation, such diseases cannot take place. So there's a field of research there for someone who's materially minded and wants to study how to keep people relatively healthy, at least not going mad, are suffering so many. The material world is now full of so many debilitating diseases, at least in part due to ignorance of these, this type of knowledge, which again is on the material platform, but which is a facet of our creation. And people would be profited by understanding these subtle things. Hare Krishna.
Jai, thank you so much. I was thinking how when Prabhupada would travel somewhere, he preferred to travel to places where he could have the windows open so that there could be air circulation. He wasn't so much keen on living in climates for very long, where you had to be, in his words, packed up tightly from November until May.
Yeah, it reminds me of some other person. Ben Franklin was also like that, or United States historical figure, the 13 colonies figure, Ben Franklin. He always wanted to sleep with the windows open so he could have air.
Yeah. Just noticing some words in the Sanskrit here for this verse, text 37. The word prapti is there, which is translated here as allowing approach. Might remind us of the prapti siddhi that a masterful yogi can employ to get stuff. And how does he get stuff? Because he's allowed to approach there somehow or other. He's able to travel along pathways that most people are not, because he's allowed the approach due to his austerities or whatever. Gurudas Prabhu says, the most fascinating two lines in this purport for me are, and he quotes, our sense of proprietorship over action is also due to the activity of the air. If the air circulation is stifled, we cannot approach a place after hearing. Do you have anything you'd care to expand on that about Gurudas Prabhu? It is fascinating indeed.
One word. Wow. I have no comment other than just fascination, amazement.
Yeah. What occurs to me is that when he says proprietorship over action, that's like, I want to move my arm like this, and I can do it. I can do it. Look at what I can do. I have proprietorship over this action. But if there's some problem with the vata, with the different vayus are not connected to my will, or that facility has been taken away for some reason by supersoul or whatever agency, I can't do what I just did.
Oh, but see, what's so interesting about what we're discussing right now is that ability, I interpret proprietorship as ability, maybe it's not the same thing, is attributed to the air rather than, what we material beings would normally think of as a bodily function or muscle function. It's not the conception of movement. Sure, we need air to move through space, but it's always been a conception of what the material body, what energy and muscle strength and flexibility has been able to generate. There's never, until now, it's the first time even though I've read this canto, it's the first time it's come to my mind that this is there. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So yeah, Panchatattva Prabhu quotes us again. It is only by the action of the air that a body moves. And when the air circulation is impeded, many diseases result. And he also mentioned a phenomenon that we see in, when we're not in the Earth's atmosphere, if there's no air, then the sense of hearing is messed with,
To draw a crude analogy, it's like if you have a machine that requires its moving parts to be lubricated and the lubrication is taken away, then everything is stifled. It becomes stuck. That movement of air, it's very, very subtle, of course. It's not something, oh, look, there's a wind tunnel in his arm. That's how he's moving. It's not like that. It's very, very subtle manifestation. But it is vata. It's, according to Ayurvedic science, it's air moving within the body, but in a very subtle way.
Yeah.
So we can have proprietorship as long as we're the tin man with our oil can and can go and grab something, say, this is mine. I was able to grab it. I have proprietorship over this. Is all mine. I can keep this for myself. And as soon as we lose our, ability, it does impede our sense of proprietorship.
Yeah. There's a popular contemporary phrase, motion is the lotion. Exercise is prescribed by so many different, disciplines of health. And I'm thinking specifically now of, say, Qigong or Tai Chi, which is practiced by many people in Southeast Asia, especially, and many people of all ages. In fact, many people of advanced ages are able to, remain mobile because they understand this connection between the subtle and gross, and they just keep themselves moving and thus do their very best
But
along these very principles to keep disease at bay.
do any of those techniques mention air specifically? Be interesting to find out.
Yes,
It's
well,
chi.
chi.
Chi sort of equates to prana in our vocabulary, which, is, yeah. Saraswati Mataji says, ghost possession and exorcism is also via air. All right, Krishna. And Panchatattva Prabhu says, at the end, however, one has to relinquish the body, heirs and all. And down will come baby, Vayu and all.
At the end, we relinquish our property to our heirs.
I'm sorry, Prabhu, I missed what you just said.
That's a joke, folks.
Oh, I don't have a very good sense of humor, so I missed it.
Obviously, I don't. I said we relinquish our property to our heirs.
Oh, I get it.
I get it.
Saraswati Mataji has her hand up.
It's a question sort of related to this one about how we have to relinquish all the gross and subtle material elements before we can get our spiritual body. But I was reading about the Pandavas, and there was a sentence that said they were able to attain their spiritual body without relinquishing anything material. So that really, I'm just trying to paraphrase there, but that really confused me, because how was it that they didn't have to relinquish all this gross and subtle material coverings? It appeared in the sentence, it almost said that they didn't have to do that and they already got their spiritual bodies. So this was in a local class here at ISKCON Vancouver, and no one really had the answer. So I thought maybe I could ask here if that's all right.
I had a thought, if people don't mind. Oh yeah, Panchatattva Prabhu says what I was basically going to say. The Pandavas didn't have to go through that process by the grace of Krishna. Yeah, I mean, who's in charge of the elements? Who's in charge of the body? Who's actually making everything work? Krishna, either personally in the case of his pure devotees, or as Paramatma personally also. But he's in charge, so whatever he says goes or doesn't go, would be my thought. And Panchatattva Prabhu sounds like he's backing me up on that. Yes, Morai Gupta Prabhu says, it seems that the body is operated pneumatically rather than electrically. Usually we get the picture of nerves and synapses being electrical, but this is even subtler. Yes, exactly. That it is a pneumatic machine, exactly. Panchatattva Prabhu says, we have to go through a traumatic breakdown, either slow or fast, but not the Pandavas.
Thank you so much. Now I can appear quite clever in our next local get-together here. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Do we have time for another verse? Is there more discussion on these two?
Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Wasn't Dhruva Maharaj given the benediction to go back to Godhead in his self-same body?
Dhruva, yeah. That's right. Yes, he's the one who, as I recall, stepped on the head of death as death approached. Yeah, he saw the airplane coming and he said, I want one for my mother too. And there was already one for her. And he didn't have to change the body.
Does that mean she went in her same body also?
That's not specified, but maybe. Seems a nice perk of bhakti that you get to go back to Godhead in your self-same body, unless your self-same body isn't so hot.
Would you want to?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, didn't the Lord give him full unfailing power of the senses for thousands and thousands of years, as long as he remained in the material world? That's not your average benediction. That means you basically have an unfailing body, practically a spiritual body already. So Tulsi Priya says, I prefer to trade mine in for a better model. $7.49. Let's see how much. Oh, Praveen Prabhu, Praveen Krishna. Yayotana pada putro munina gitayar bakaha mrityo kritvaiva murd. Wait, hold on a second. A laughing emoji impedes the reading. Mrityu kritvaiva murd nyang grim aruroha hare padang. By hearing these topics from the sage, Narada, the son of King Uttanapada, Dhruva, was enlightened regarding the personality of Godhead, and he ascended to the abode of the Lord, placing his feet over the head of death. Thank you so much, Praveen Krishna Prabhu. All right, so 38 has a modestly sized purport. Who haven't we heard from in a while? Dana Mataji, would you like to read the next verse?
Sure. Ayushcha Pashatam Matrad Rupam Divertat Aput Samutitam Tatas Tejas Chakshu Rupopalam Hanam. Translation. By interactions of the air and the sensations of touch, one receives different forms according to destiny. By evolution of such forms, there is fire, and the eye sees different forms in color. Purport. Because of destiny, the touch sensation, the interactions of air, and the situation of the mind, which is produced of the ethereal elements, one receives a body according to his previous activities. Needless to say, a living entity transmigrates from one form to another. His form changes according to destiny and by the arrangement of a superior authority which controls the interaction of air and the mental situation. Form is the combination of different types of sense perception. Predestined activities are the plans of the mental situation and the interaction of air. Wow. Digesting that one. I love the sentence. His form changes according to destiny and by the arrangement of a superior authority which controls the interaction of air and the mental situation. Just, I don't know, something about that really stood out. I'd love to hear everyone else's realizations. They're probably a little more wise than mine.
No, thank you so much for reading, and thank you for your comment. That's very good. It is interesting. I was just going back a bit to see what Srila Vishwanath had to say. He doesn't have any commentary on this present verse, 38, but he does have some things to say about 37 and 36, and I see that Panchatattva Prabhu has a comment there. Oh, he's quoting the fourth canto. I just wanted to go back and look at this. We're talking about the characteristics of touch and air. He specifically says about air that it provides movement as moving the branches of trees. It causes association, as in bringing graphs together. It causes cohesion of an object as one unit. It brings the sense objects such as sound, coldness, or fragrance to the organs such as ear, skin, or nose. It should be understood that movement, association, and bringing the sense object to the sense are all particular types of conjunction, propti, there's that word again. Air brings life to all the senses. These actions of air are its distinctive features. So it brings things together, it provides cohesion, you know. Panchatattva Prabhu, could you read the quote that you posted there?
Sure. It's just a couple of verses from the process Maharaj Prithu was following as he was getting ready to go back to Godhead. And no, it's okay, here we go. In this way, Prithu Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. In this way, according to the different positions of the various parts of the body, Prithu Maharaj merged the wholes of his senses with the sky, his bodily liquids, such as blood and various secretions, with the totality of water, and he merged earth with water, then water with fire, fire with air, air with sky, and so on.
It's the whole process of creation in reverse. That's what the yogis are able to do.
Amazing.
They don't teach you down at the yoga studio. Tulsi Priya has her hand.
I had a question. I don't know if Maharaj is participating even in writing, but if not, maybe somebody else can supply a shastric confirmation or refutation of my idea, and which may not be my idea. But it seems that we are all said to be part and parcels as spirit souls of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We're minute portions of him spiritually. So we were talking about this the other day, and I was saying, well, materially, aren't we part and parcel of the universe, because you talk about these different elements. So it would make sense that, when the living entity leaves the body, then those elements merge, like in the Bible, it says, unto dust you return, but there's much more than dust. There's fire, earth, air, water. And even the holes in your body, those are ether. That's the space where, that's the space in your body. So I was just wondering if that's, the idea that we're also not only spiritually part and parcel of Krishna, but materially part and parcel of the material elements, that we're like little microcosms of universes.
Yeah, that's what's being shown here. I mean, to me, that's illustrated by the quotes that Panchatattva Prabhu just posted. Yeah. Just a couple more comments. We're almost to our ultimate time here. Gurudas Prabhu says, in these verses we've been discussing, air is given such importance that it actually seems to back the material scientists' version that there cannot be life without air. In other words, not life on Mars, on the sun, or whatever, because there's no oxygen. Yeah, but that's just Atmavan Manyate Jagat, that we think that because life isn't the way we see it in our corner of the world, that it can't exist like that anywhere else. But there's life in the bottom of the Marianas Trench, where there's tremendous heat and pressure that neither you nor I could exist at. So that theory is even not materially so strong.
And I accept that. I was just making a remark based on the
sure
air based.
Yeah.
Verses.
I know. Saraswati Mata says, so aside from the Pandavas and Dhruva Maharaj, do the majority of conditional souls, when purified completely, attain the spiritual body like Prithu Maharaj? Someone like to field that one? I'm not... the majority of souls have to just leave the body. You have to separate from the body.
I thought, yeah, if you go back to Godhead, you get a spiritual body.
Yeah, I mean, you have a spiritual body already, but it's just you're
Yeah.
divested of your gross and
manifest.
subtle bodies. Yeah, purified completely means you get to trash the costume. Panchatattva Prabhu says from one of the purports, the words yatastanam vibhagasaha indicate that one should know the process of creation and should meditate upon the creative process inversely and thus become free from material contamination. And Tulsi Priya asks, does life air necessarily mean oxygen? I'm thinking not. Yes, for some other living entity elsewhere in the universe, couldn't it be something else? Yeah, there's life everywhere, all different kinds of life. We only know this earth life and not much more than that. In fact, we know so much little more than that that most of us think that there's not even life on other planets. But that's just not the case. It's 8 o'clock. It's time for some kirtan. Maybe Panchatattva Prabhu, you could nominate tonight's kirtan leader.
Let's see. Krishna Konteya Prabhu. Haribo, Krishna Konteya Prabhu, would you grace us with a beautiful kirtan? Okay. You have to bring up your microphone.
It's still too quiet for us, Krishna.
It's still too low, Prabhu.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Tulsi Priya reminded me. Here he goes.
Oh, he's muted himself.
Well, go ahead, Krishna Kanteya Prabhu.
Seems to be having technical difficulties.
Yes, you can't hear me still.
Yeah,
Now
we can
we're
hear you
good.
now.
Yeah, good now.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Nita Gora, Haribo, 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 Gora Haribo, Nita Gora Haribo, 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 Gora Haribo, Nita Gora Premanande Haribo. Jayam Vishnu Padramsa Pariraj Jagacharya Stotar Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Padramsa Pariraj Jagacharya Stotar Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. This compound Acharya, Savior of the world, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Krishna Paramahamsa Pariraja Acharya Sutta Sat Shri Srimad His Divine Grace. Guru Das Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Hari Hari Bol.
Jai Prabhu. Thank you so much, Krishna Kanteya Prabhu. And there's a comment here from Tulsi Priya. She says, I spy a happy birthday poster in Krishna Kanteya Prabhu's room. If your birthday passed recently, just wanted to express my appreciation for your appearance and association among this Sangha. Happy birthday, Prabhu.
Jai. Krishna Konteya Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Yay.
Thank you everyone, so much for being here. Hare Krishna Madhupati Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Jai. Thank you for being with us.
Jai Madhupati Prabhu. Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol.
Dana says, oh, happy birthday. Hope I said that right.
Happy birthday.
That was exactly
You
how it was
sounded,
supposed
you sounded just like her.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends ki jai.
Jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Brinda ki jai.
Jai.
Haribol.
Haribol.